There comes a moment when you look at yourself and quietly admit, I hate this feeling, not because you are weak, but because you are tired, tired of carrying emotions you never asked for, tired of pretending that everything is fine, tired of fighting battles no one sees. This feeling doesn't arrive loudly. It sits with you in silence, follows you into crowded rooms, and waits for you in the dark when the world finally goes quiet. But what if this feeling is not here to break you? What if it's here to wake you up? Today is not about running from discomfort. It's about standing still long enough to understand it, to face it, and to rise above it. Because the moment you stop hating the feeling and start listening to it is the moment real strength begins. I hate this feeling, not because it hurts, but because it reminds me of how long I've been ignoring myself. It's the kind of feeling that doesn't scream for attention. It just stays. It sits in your chest when you wake up, follows you through the day, and waits patiently when you try to sleep. You can distract yourself, keep moving, keep smiling, keep doing what you're supposed to do, but it doesn't leave. And the worst part isn't the pain. The worst part is realizing that you've been carrying it alone for so long that it feels normal. This feeling doesn't mean you failed. It means you noticed. It means something inside refuses to stay numb forever. People think strength is about endurance, about pushing through, about never stopping. But real strength shows up when you finally admit that something isn't right. When you stop lying to yourself, when you stop pretending that you're fine just because others expect you to be. Hating the feeling is not weakness. It's awareness waking up after a long silence. Most people don't hate the feeling itself. They hate what it reveals. It shows them the parts they buried, the dreams they postponed, the boundaries they never set, the love they gave without receiving, the respect they never demanded. And when that realization hits, it's uncomfortable. It shakes the identity you've been performing for the world. It asks questions you don't have answers to yet. And instead of listening, most people run. They stay busy. They stay loud. They stay distracted. Anything to avoid sitting with themselves, because sitting with yourself means facing the truth. And the truth is rarely gentle at first. It doesn't arrive with solutions. It arrives with honesty. It shows you where you compromised, where you stayed silent, where you accepted less because you were afraid of losing more. This feeling is heavy because it carries memory. It remembers every moment you swallowed your words, every time you chose peace over truth, every time you convinced yourself that it wasn't that bad. And now it wants to be acknowledged. Not fixed, not erased, just seen, just heard. There's a strange kind of courage in saying, I hate this feeling instead of I don't feel anything. Numbness is easier. Numbness lets you survive without questioning. But feeling demands responsibility. Feeling demands change. Feeling demands that you stop betraying yourself. People often ask why emotions hurt so much. It's because they are honest. They don't care about your image, your plans, or your excuses. They reflect what is real. And when reality doesn't match the life you're living, the conflict becomes pain. That pain is not punishment, it's communication. This feeling is trying to tell you that something matters, that you matter, that your inner world has been ignored for too long. And when you finally stop and listen, it doesn't immediately get better. Sometimes it gets louder, sometimes it gets heavier. Because you're no longer running. You're standing still, and everything you avoided is catching up, but standing still is not giving up. It's choosing to face what you've been postponing. It's choosing honesty over comfort. Growth doesn't come from constant movement. It comes from moments of stillness where you finally admit what hurts. This feeling doesn't need to be hated forever. It just needs to be understood. And understanding doesn't mean justifying the pain or romanticizing it. It means recognizing its purpose. Pain exists to protect something valuable. It shows you where your limits were crossed, where your needs were ignored, where your values were compromised. You didn't wake up one day and decide to feel this way. It built slowly, quietly, through repetition, through neglect, through self-abandonment disguised as sacrifice. And now it's asking you to stop. Stop forcing yourself into spaces that drain you. Stop shrinking to fit expectations that were never meant for you. Stop giving energy to people who only notice your absence, never your presence. This feeling is not your enemy. It's the last honest voice you haven't silenced yet. There's dignity in acknowledging pain without turning it into your identity. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are not weak because you're tired. You are human because you reached a point where pretending stopped working. Healing doesn't begin with happiness, it begins with truth. And truth is often uncomfortable. It asks you to grieve what you hoped for, to release what you can't control, to forgive yourself for what you didn't know then. This feeling carries grief, but it also carries clarity. When you stop fighting it, you start learning from it. You realize that it's not asking you to collapse, it's asking you to change direction, to choose yourself in ways you were afraid to before, to set boundaries even when it costs you approval, to walk away even when attachment begs you to stay. This feeling doesn't mean everything is falling apart. Sometimes it means everything false is falling away, and that process is never gentle. It strips you down to what's real. What remains is quieter, simpler, more honest. You don't overcome this feeling by becoming someone else. You overcome it by becoming more yourself, by aligning your actions with your truth, by respecting your limits, by allowing yourself to rest without guilt, by choosing integrity over comfort. The world teaches you to suppress, to perform, to endure silently. But your inner world keeps score, and eventually it asks for your attention. This feeling is that request. You don't need to rush through it. You don't need to solve it today. You just need to stop running from it. Sit with it. Let it speak. Let it show you what needs to change. Let it guide you back to yourself. Because the moment you stop hating the feeling and start listening to it, something shifts. Not everything, not instantly, but enough to remind you that you are still here, still capable of honesty, still capable of choosing a life that doesn't require you to disappear inside yourself. Pain doesn't arrive to destroy you, it arrives to speak. But most people don't listen. They silence it, drown it in noise, bury it under routines, responsibilities, and forced smiles. And the moment pain is silenced, it doesn't disappear. It sinks deeper, it becomes heavier, it changes shape. What could have been understood turns into something that controls you quietly from the inside. When you silence pain, you teach yourself that your inner world is inconvenient, that your emotions are a problem, that your truth should wait. And every time you do that, the pain grows. Not because it wants revenge, but because it wants to be heard. Ignored pain doesn't fade with time. It accumulates. People think talking about pain makes them weak. But silence doesn't make you strong. Silence makes pain lonely, and lonely pain is dangerous. It isolates you even when you're surrounded by people. It convinces you that no one would understand, that no one would care, that you should handle everything alone, and slowly that belief becomes your reality. Pain becomes heavier when you don't give it language, when you don't allow yourself to name it, when you avoid asking why it's there. Understanding doesn't mean overthinking, it means allowing yourself to be honest without judgment. It means sitting with discomfort instead of running from it. It means asking yourself questions you've been avoiding. What hurt me? Why did it hurt? What did I lose? What did I ignore? These questions don't weaken you, they clarify you. But clarity requires courage, because understanding pain often reveals truths you weren't ready to face. It reveals where you stayed too long, where you accepted too little, where you betrayed yourself to keep others comfortable. Silencing pain feels productive at first. You keep functioning, you keep showing up, you keep being reliable, but inside something starts to collapse quietly. You become disconnected from yourself. You stop recognizing your own emotional signals. You normalize exhaustion, you normalize resentment, you normalize emptiness, and then one day the smallest thing breaks you, not because it was big, but because it was the final weight added to a load you never put down. People call it an overreaction. They don't see the years of silence behind it. They don't see the emotions you swallowed, the words you never said, the boundaries you never enforced. Understanding pain doesn't mean reliving it endlessly. It means acknowledging its existence and its message. Pain always carries information. It tells you where your limits are. It shows you what matters. It reveals what needs to change. But if you refuse to understand it, it repeats itself louder each time. There's a difference between feeling pain and suffering unnecessarily. Suffering happens when pain is ignored, when it's denied, when it's treated like an inconvenience instead of a signal. Understanding pain transforms it. It doesn't erase it immediately, but it gives it direction. Most people weren't taught how to understand their emotions. They were taught how to suppress them. Be strong, don't cry, move on, stay positive. But positivity without honesty becomes another form of denial, and denial doesn't heal. It delays. Pain wants presence, not perfection. It doesn't need you to have answers. It needs you to stop pretending it isn't there. The moment you allow yourself to feel without judgment, the weight begins to shift, not because the pain vanishes, but because you're no longer carrying it alone. Understanding pain also means understanding yourself, your patterns, your fears, your attachments, your need for validation, your tendency to abandon yourself to be accepted. Pain often points to these patterns, and patterns can't be broken if they're never acknowledged. There's a quiet strength in saying, "This hurts, and I need to understand why." That sentence alone changes your relationship with pain. It turns it from an enemy into a teacher, a harsh one maybe, but an honest one. When pain is understood, it stops demanding attention through suffering. It stops showing up as anxiety, anger, numbness, or exhaustion. It starts to settle. It starts to soften because it knows it's finally being heard. You don't need to explain your pain to everyone. Understanding doesn't require an audience. It requires sincerity, a willingness to sit with yourself without distraction, without escape, without pretending. Pain becomes heavier when you rush past it, when you treat healing like a deadline, when you expect yourself to be fine just because time has passed. Time alone doesn't heal. Awareness does. Reflection does. Compassion does. Understanding pain also means allowing yourself to grieve, not just people, but versions of yourself, dreams that didn't happen, trust that was broken, time that can't be recovered. Grief isn't weakness. It's acknowledgement, and acknowledgement lightens the load. You don't carry pain because you're broken. You carry it because you cared, because you hoped, because you tried, and that matters. Understanding pain doesn't erase what happened, but it changes how it lives inside you. Silenced pain turns inward. It becomes self-blame, self-doubt, self-criticism. Understood pain turns outward into boundaries, growth, self-respect. It teaches you what you will no longer tolerate, what you will protect, what you will choose differently. There is no shortcut to understanding pain. It requires patience. It requires honesty. It requires slowing down in a world that tells you to move on quickly. But the cost of not understanding it is far greater. It shows up later in ways you don't expect. Pain doesn't need to be dramatic to be valid. Quiet pain can be just as heavy, especially when it's been carried for too long without recognition. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to compare it. You just have to acknowledge it. When you stop silencing pain, you stop living at war with yourself. You stop spending energy pretending. That energy becomes available for healing, for clarity, for change. Understanding pain is an act of self-respect. It says, my inner world matters, my experience matters, my feelings deserve attention. And that decision alone begins to shift everything, slowly, quietly, honestly. Most people don't realize they are running. They call it staying busy, staying strong, staying productive. But underneath all of that movement is avoidance. Avoidance of emotions that feel too heavy, too confusing, too painful to face. Running feels safer in the moment. It gives the illusion of control. But every time you run from what you feel, you teach yourself that emotions are dangerous, that they must be escaped, that they cannot be handled. Fear is learned through avoidance. When you run from an emotion, your mind records it as a threat, something to be feared, something to be suppressed, something that might break you if you slow down. And the next time that emotion appears, even quietly, your body reacts faster. Tension, anxiety, restlessness. The fear grows not because the emotion is stronger, but because you've never stayed long enough to understand it. Facing emotions is uncomfortable because it removes distraction. It asks you to sit in stillness with sensations you'd rather escape. But discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is information. And the moment you stop running, you realize that emotions are not trying to destroy you. They are trying to pass through you. Strength is often misunderstood. People think strength means never feeling overwhelmed, never breaking, never needing help. But real strength shows up when you allow yourself to feel without judgment, when you stay present instead of reaching for escape, when you trust yourself enough to sit with what's uncomfortable. Running teaches you to doubt your capacity. Facing teaches you that you can survive more than you thought. Emotions rise, peak, and fall when they are allowed. It's resistance that traps them. When you face an emotion, you give it space, and in that space it begins to lose its grip. Fear grows in the dark. It feeds on avoidance and silence. The more you avoid an emotion, the larger it becomes in your imagination. It turns into something undefined, something overwhelming. But when you face it, it becomes specific, it becomes manageable, it becomes human. Facing emotions doesn't mean reacting to them. It doesn't mean acting on every feeling. It means acknowledging their presence without immediately trying to change them. It means saying, "This is here, and I am still here with it." That alone is an act of courage. Most emotional pain comes not from the feeling itself, but from the belief that you shouldn't be feeling it. That belief creates resistance, resistance creates tension, and tension creates suffering. Facing emotions dissolves that resistance. When you stop running, you begin to notice patterns. You see which emotions return again and again. You see what triggers them. You see what they are connected to. And with that awareness comes choice. You're no longer reacting blindly. You're responding consciously. Facing emotions also builds trust with yourself. Every time you stay present with discomfort, you prove to yourself that you can handle your inner world. That trust becomes confidence. Quiet confidence, not loud, not performative, real. Running keeps you trapped in survival mode. Facing allows you to move into growth. Survival is about escape. Growth is about understanding, and understanding requires presence. There is a difference between being consumed by emotions and being with them. Facing doesn't mean drowning. It means floating, letting the wave pass instead of fighting it. The more you fight, the stronger the wave feels. The more you allow, the quicker it moves through. Facing emotions teaches patience. Emotions don't operate on logic or schedules. They have their own rhythm, and when you try to rush them, they resist. When you allow them, they soften. Fear tells you that if you face an emotion, it will never end, but emotions are temporary by nature. What lasts is the avoidance. What stays is the unresolved. Facing is what allows movement. When you face emotions, you also face parts of yourself you've been avoiding: vulnerability, longing, disappointment, anger, grief. These parts don't disappear because you ignore them, they just wait. Facing them brings integration, wholeness. Strength isn't about control, it's about capacity. The capacity to feel deeply without losing yourself. The capacity to remain present even when it's uncomfortable. The capacity to choose honesty over escape. Every time you run, fear grows stronger. Every time you face, fear loses power. N-O-T, instantly, not dramatically, quietly, gradually, until one day you realize you're no longer afraid of feeling. Facing emotions doesn't make life easier overnight, but it makes you steadier, more grounded, less reactive, more connected to yourself, and that connection becomes a foundation you can stand on when things get heavy. Running teaches you to abandon yourself. Facing teaches you to stay with your experience, to stay with your truth, to stay with yourself even when it's uncomfortable. And in staying, something shifts. The fear that once controlled you starts to loosen, not because the emotions disappeared, but because you learned you don't have to run from them anymore. Most pain doesn't come from what you feel. It comes from how you judge yourself for feeling it. The moment an emotion appears, the mind steps in with criticism. You shouldn't feel this way. You're overreacting. Others have it worse. Be stronger. Move on. And just like that, a natural human emotion turns into shame. The feeling stays, but now it's wrapped in self-judgment, and that weight is much heavier. Judgment creates resistance. Resistance creates suffering. Healing cannot begin in a space where you are constantly at war with your inner experience. You cannot punish yourself into peace. You cannot criticize yourself into healing. The voice that judges your feelings only deepens the wound. Emotions are not moral failures, they are responses. They arise from experiences, memories, needs, and boundaries. When you judge what you feel, you disconnect from the message behind it. You stop listening and start fighting, and emotions don't respond well to force. They respond to understanding. Most people learned early on that certain emotions were unacceptable. Anger was labeled disrespect, sadness was labeled weakness, fear was labeled failure. So they grew up believing that feeling these emotions meant something was wrong with them. That belief follows them into adulthood, shaping how they treat themselves in moments of vulnerability. Healing begins when you allow yourself to feel without attaching a story of failure to it. When you say, "This is here and I don't need to punish myself for it," that moment creates space, and space is where healing happens. Judging emotions keeps you stuck in the past. It keeps you replaying moments, blaming yourself for reactions, wishing you were different. Acceptance doesn't mean liking what you feel. It means allowing it to exist without adding shame. When you stop judging your emotions, you start to observe them. Observation creates distance, not disconnection, but clarity. You notice that emotions come and go, that they shift, that they change intensity, that they don't define you. Self-judgment makes emotions feel permanent. Acceptance reveals their temporary nature. One traps you, the other frees you. Healing is not about fixing yourself. It's about understanding that you were never broken. You adapted. You survived. You responded in the only ways you knew how at the time. Judging yourself for past reactions ignores the context you were in when you made them. When you stop judging what you feel, compassion replaces criticism. And compassion is not weakness, it's strength directed inward. It allows you to hold pain without collapsing under it. Many people believe that if they stop judging themselves, they'll become lazy, careless, or indulgent. But the opposite happens. Without judgment, you become clearer, more honest, more responsible. You make better choices because they come from awareness, not shame. Judgment clouds perception. Acceptance sharpens it. When you accept your feelings, you can actually hear what they're telling you. You recognize unmet needs, crossed boundaries, unspoken truths, ignored limits. Healing begins when you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is this feeling trying to show me?" That shift changes everything. You don't need to justify your emotions to anyone, including yourself. They don't need permission to exist. They already do. Your job isn't to suppress them, it's to relate to them differently. Judging emotions keeps you stuck in cycles. You feel something, judge yourself for it, suppress it, and then feel it again even stronger. Acceptance breaks that cycle. It allows emotions to complete themselves. There is relief in allowing yourself to be human without punishment, to feel sadness without labeling yourself weak, to feel anger without labeling yourself bad, to feel fear without labeling yourself incapable. Healing is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It begins in small internal shifts, a softer inner voice, a pause before self-criticism, a moment of kindness toward yourself when things feel heavy. When you stop judging your feelings, you stop fighting your inner world. And when the fight ends, energy returns, clarity returns, choice returns. Acceptance doesn't erase pain, but it removes the unnecessary suffering layered on top of it. And that alone makes the pain lighter. You are not required to be perfect to heal. You are only required to be honest. Honest about what, you feel. Honest without punishment. Honest without comparison. Healing begins the moment you allow yourself to feel without turning against yourself. The moment you stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and start saying, "This is part of my experience right now." And in that moment, something inside you finally feels safe enough to soften.